This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Here we go.
Okay, good morning, Rabbi. We're learning Sefer Rus, Parak Beis. So the next sheet you have is coming up. It's page Yud Zayin in what I'm handing out here. And I'll tell you the truth, I spent time last night learning the Malbim on these psukim, and I could not make heads or tails of what he was saying, kimat on every pasuk. And then I said, okay, let me give it another try this morning. And this morning, it just went. So, and it's really, really beautiful stuff. Okay. Parak Beis Pasuk Hey. So, if you remember in the previous pasuk, we explained why Vihine Boyaz, behold, that this was a new davar chadash. Boyaz was masakin sheyiyah shoyal b'shloim chaveroi b'shem. Now, the next couple of psukim speak about Rus coming down to the field. And amazingly, there are a lot of details given here. What exactly Rus collects, where she collects it, what Boyaz tells her, the instructions he gives her, and none of the Mefarshim explain what these details are. And it seems to be a part of the Megillah which is really overlooked, and the Malbim does not let anything fall by the wayside. And really everything is brimming with tremendous significance. Okay, so Parak Pasuk Hey. Vayomer Boyaz lenaroi. Boyaz says to his attendant, Hanitzav al hakoitzrim, who's standing above the harvesters, Lemi hanara hazois. To who does this maiden belong to? What exactly is the question? Who does she belong to? What is this nar who is standing by the harvesters? So let's point out, Rashi brings down the Divrei Chazal, that here Boyaz is a Gadol Hadar. Why would he have taken notice of a woman? Why is he asking about women? Rashi says, he sees in her tznius and chachma. He sees that 2 stalks she gathers, 3 she doesn't gather. He sees that she gathers standing and she lies down. In other words, she kneels down sitting. She doesn't bend over, but rather in order to avoid attracting attention, she does it in a very modest way. And this is what caused Boyaz's inquiry. Okay, but it says the Malbim Pasuk Hey, Vayomer Boyaz lenaroi. Kasha ra Boyaz es Rus malaketes levada b'sadeh. When Boyaz sees Rus gathering alone in the field, v'lefanea amorim harbe, and in front of her were many bundles. In other words, Boyaz sees this woman, a little woman, and she's being very successful. She's collected a lot of stuff. Because as we're going to see in the upcoming psukim, Kiad ha'erev likta ke'efa sa'irim, she collected an ephah. Now an ephah is a lot. How much is it? There are 6 eggs in a lug. There are 4 lug in a kav. There are 6 kav in a sa. There are 3 sa in an ephah. That means she collected the volume of, I believe, 432 eggs worth. It's a lot of stuff. That's pretty, that all in a day's work. So Boyaz is asking, like, how did she collect so much? She must be the wife or the daughter of one of the harvesters. He thought the harvester must be her husband, or her father, and he must have chased away all the other aniyim. In other words, how did this little Yidina over here, or whatever she is, we're going to see, how was she so successful? Must be she's related to one of the harvesters, and the harvesters shoot away everybody else. Shetilkat hilavada v'hinichalasav gamin ha'amarim. He must have let her collect from the bundles. That's why he asked the kid in charge, the person who's overseeing, Limi hanar hazois. In other words, which one of the kaitzrim is she married to? Like, who arranged this for her to chase away all the aniyim and just have her collect?
Amorim apart? What is an amor?
Bundle?
I mean, if they bundled her up, she's still allowed to take from out of the bundle. She's only doing leket, right?
I think what Boyaz thinks she must have done is she must have gone to take out of the bundles, otherwise...
It says in design,
Okay, we're going to see the Malbim learns that she only took leket and not any other of the matanos. But maybe that's what Bayaz thinks she must have done. Okay, so the Koitzer says like this: Vayan hanar hanitzav ala koitzrim vayomar. The lad who is standing over the harvesters says, he speaks up and he says, Nara moyaviyahi. She is a Moabite lattice, and Hashava im Naami mistei Mayav, who returns with Nami from the fields of Mayav. In other words, he's addressing questions that he's being asked, and he's also addressing questions that he's not being asked. Says the Malbim, Vayan vayomer pasuk vav. Ana al she'elosav, he answered the question he was asked. V'gam amar elav dvarim shelo shalalim. He also answered questions that he wasn't asked. Al she'elosai l'mi hanara zois heishiv. Regarding the question of who is this woman, he responded, Eino shal hakoitzrim, rak nara moyaviyahi. He said, she is not one of the harvesters. She's not married or the daughter of one of the harvesters. She's a Moabite woman. Then how could you give her leket? Because she's a goy. A goy is not zoichem nasanim. V'loy tishal echetin leket lani akum. Amar hashavam nami mistei moyav shenes gairo magiel leket. She converted. So she is not belonging to the workers. Rather, she is an independent aniyah. And she is a Moabite. She converted.
If she converted. Called her
because she still remains with that appellation. In other words, okay. Vatoimer, and she said like this: Ala katana v'asafti v'amarim. Please let me collect and gather from the bundles. Actually, let's take that back. Amarim are stalks. Okay, the Targum says Amarim are stalks. The standing grain, right? Like we say, Mehachel chermesh ba'kama. Amarim are the shiboilim. Acharei hakoitzrim, after the harvesters. Vatavoy, and she came. Vatamoy, and she stood. Me'oz haboiker v'yarata, from morning until now. Zeh shivta habayis ma'ot. It's only now that she's sitting in the house a little bit. Really, without the Malbim, it's really impossible to understand what's going on here. We just say outside, and then we'll read inside. What the harvester says to Boaz is, no, you're making a mistake. She's not close to one of the harvesters. She just asked, could I please collect and gather the standing grain after the koitzrim? In other words, whatever they drop, I'm going to collect. How is she so successful in amassing ke'efa sa'irim? Because she hasn't stopped working from morning until now. She's not a lazy, good for nothing. She is very industrious. She has been working the whole day. It's only now that it's the end of the day, so she sat down to rest a little bit. Sometimes, you come, you see workers resting. Oh, you lazy. Been working my head off. I just took a break now. Now, usually you don't believe them. Right? But that's... But now this is the report of the harvester. Pasuk Zayin in the Malbim Atoimer. Ze Amar loy mashloi shal. Now the harvester is telling Boaz what he didn't ask. Shaloi lakcha. She didn't take loy chilek bepeya uvishikcha. She didn't take any peya, any shikcha. Rak leket levad. Only leket. This is what it means. Sha'amra ala kata bashivalim acharei hakoritzim v'yasafti ba'amarim latzoloimer. Sheha'aniyim achar shalakhu chalkam bepeya. The other poor people, after they took their share in the payah, they went to other fields. There are enough fields commensurate with the poor. When the aniyim saw this field already has a collector, each one went to another field. That there he gathers alone. And she remained here as the sole collector of this field. It doesn't say she's collecting after the other people collecting. She's collecting after the koitzrim, after the harvesters. And she said, V'yasafti v'amarim ratzaloymar shekomasha asva b'chdei oimer asasa mimenu omer. Whatever she collected kedei omer, she made from it an omer. V'loy toimer sheganva omer min ha'amarim shal hasada ki asfa acharei hakoitzrim v'samach lahem.
Maybe she was going. What's the implication here? That she wasn't. What she steal? She was working for the culture.
I don't know exactly what the Malbim means, but I don't know what it means. Komasha asva b'chdei omer asasa mimenu omer. But what he says, don't suspect her of grabbing the standing grain of the field, because she only collected after the kaitzrim. In other words, only what the kaitzrim dropped, only that's what she collected. V'ra'u shaloi lakha davar shaloi kashura.
What Malbim was talking about here is that when people collect, there's usually some shrinkage. If some things drop or things break off.
Yeah.
But in her case, whatever she collected, she made out of an omer that she collected an omer. So you might think if that was the case, that she played some games, because that's not normally the case when you would collect.
Maybe. I hear.
It's a business approach.
I hear. And these kaitzrim saw shaloi lakha davar shaloi kashur, that she didn't take anything illicitly. V'loi tispala sheyesh la amarim rabim. Don't wonder that she has so much grain. Ki vatavoy vatamoid, because she came and she stood. Vatavoy meoz haboker vatamoid ad ata. Sha'ad ata loy nocha rega. She did not rest for a moment. Rak ata bevoy boyaz. It's only now that boyaz came. Yashvel anuach ma'ad bebayis shal yisham basada. She took a respite in the house, in the field. Sheyochlu apoilim v'yanuchu sham, the place where the workers eat and rest there. And Omar, the harvester, said, Zeh shifta habayis ma'ad. Zeh rega, it's only this moment, sheyashva lanuach b'bayis, that she sat to rest in the house, shahayasham, v'yashva rak ma'ad, she only sat a little bit, v'yad ata, and until now, lo yirgia rega, she did not rest for a moment, v'al kain asva alumais, and that's how she gathered all these bundles. So now that Boaz hears the information, now Boaz is taking this in. He's saying to himself, this woman, at the end of the day, she collected a lot of stuff. It would be like meeting an Oni at the end of the day, and he has in his pushka $4,000. I mean,
where did he get it from?
Where did he get it from? I mean, maybe a few people were generous, but now Boaz is hearing that when he asked his workers, what's with this woman, they gave her the benefit of the doubt. In other words, they could have said, I don't know what's going on with this woman. How does she have so much grain? But that wasn't their response. The response was, they defended her, and they defended her very reasonably. So Boaz is taking this in, that, this is probably a good place for her to continue collecting leket, because it's not just a place where she'll be successful in getting food, but the workers like her over here. The workers have a good eye to her. So now Boaz turns to her. Vayomer Boaz al Rus. Boaz says to Rus, Haloi shamat biti. Have I not heard, my daughter? Al telchi lilkot besada acher. Don't go to gather in another field. V'gam lo sa'avuri mizeh. Do not move on from here. The question is, that's repetitive. He says, don't go gather another field. Don't move on from here. V'choy sidbakin im na'aroisai. And so you should cling with my na'aroisai. What does na'aroisai mean?
My na'aros.
My na'aros.
That's na'arosi.
My girls.
My girls, right? Not my men, not my lads, but my... How do you say lads in feminine? Lasses. So not with my lads, but with my lasses. Okay?
Isn't na'arosoi the wrong grammatical ending? It should be na'arosi. My.
Well, it's plural.
Na'aros shali, na'arosi, right? Na'arosi.
Oh.
Na'ari would be my...
No, Na'ari would be my lad. Na'aroi soy is my last sis. It's in feminine. Look in the next pasuk. Eheinayech, your eyes, basodeh asher yiktsoirun, v'halacht achareihen. Look at those words. Your eyes in the field, asher yiktsoirun. What does yiktsoirun mean? That they will harvest. Masculine or feminine? Feminine, right? Not yiktsoirum, but yiktsoirun. That the women will cut. V'halacht acharei hen. Go after the females. Halo itzivi es hane'arim levilti nageich. I commanded the na'arim, the men, not to touch you. Nobody explains what's going on here. And I never even picked up on the fact that Pasuk Ches, we're talking about Naroi Soy, go at Yuktsoy Run, Acharei Hen, I told my Na'arim not to touch you. So Malbim says very beautifully, I want you sticking around here, hang around the women, hang around the girls, go follow the girls. I told, the men, they'll be happy, they'll be upset that you're going away from them. I already took care of them. I told them not to touch you. None of them can explain like what's going on over here, but clearly there's a very clear directions. Hang around Na'aroi Soy, and wherever they are Yiktsoy Run, you follow Acharei Hen. I commanded the young men, don't touch you. Vitzamis.
But what were his Na'aros doing there in the field?
Okay, we'll see.
Men with the coats room, right?
We'll see. Apparently there were female attendants as well. Vitzamis, but if you're thirsty, v'halacht el hakelim, go to the
watering hole.
the vessels, v'shasis, there you drink me'asher yishavun hane'arim.
Why?
When it comes to the water, go to the men. You could read these psukim if you just learn with Rashi. No, you know what's flying. Take a look at the Malbim. Malbim says, Pasuk Ches, Vayomer Boyas halo shamat biti. I heard, I see here, they look at you with a good eye. I'll tell you, don't go collect in another field. And it could be the owner of the other field, you won't find favor with him. He already told her, don't go to someone else's property. What he means is, don't even go to another one of my fields. Stay in this field of mine. Even in my fields. Bayaz had a lot of fields. Don't go to another one. Maybe the lads there or the person appointed there won't like you. When you go harvest the field, don't go by the men, rak b'tzad shel hana'arais. Go by the ladies. Separate harvest. Now maybe the reason he said that is he had intentions to marry her, so he didn't want her
Picked up.
Getting somebody else to get interest.
Einayich, your eyes. I'm always taken by the fact that 2 times in the Megillas you have the word Einayich, and they both have the same trop. Also in Shiur HaShirim, Eheinayich breichos b'cheshbain, and here, Eheinayich. Okay, I don't know what I'm going to do with that, but I'm just pointing that out. Einayich, lachein tasem einayich b'sad asher yiktsoiron hana'oros. Keep your eyes on the field that the girls are cutting. V'halacht acharei hen of the na'oros. Don't be afraid shazois yichar lahana'orim, that this will upset the lads. Masha'ad misrachek, as that which you're distancing yourself from them. Ki haloi tzivisi es hana'orim levilti nagech, because I commanded the lads not to touch you. V'loi zois levad, and not this alone. Ki vitzamis v'halacht el hakelim ratzaloymar. Ki matzanu. Now this is an interesting thing. I don't fully understand what he means. But why, when it comes to the water, does he say, go by the lads?
Wasn't it the custom in those days to have these big heavy rocks over the wells? Every time by Yaakov, they had to come and needed the men to push the rocks off.
Okay, perhaps. Listen to what he says. Listen to what he says. We know that David needed a drink once from the well in Beis Lechem that was in the gate. That means David HaMelech knew they had good water at the gate of Beis Lechem. The only thing is the shar. What's going on in the shar? Uhu v'oyaz Allah hashar v'yeshav shah. The shar is the shar of Mishpat. That's what the Sanhedrin can mean.
Yeah, the best in there was there.
Uvashar hashar hu Moshav haSanhedrin. He was the shofet. The shar is the seat of the Sanhedrin. Lo hinichu sham naras l'shamayim. They didn't let the girls hang around there to draw water. The men, the boys would draw the water from there. But it was a tircha to go all the way there. They would not let the aniyim go all the way there to take the water. But rather other water that they drew from a closer place. Amar Allah, he said to her, "Shi tisha min hamayim sheshavu ha'na'arim." Go take from the water that the Na'arim drew. Ki tziva lahem shelo yimchu biyada. He commanded them not to protest.
She got a VIP there.
Now, which well is she drawing from? By the Sanhedrin, by the Shar, or the other well which is closer?
So, Rabbi, I have a question. He said to her, "Don't go to even one of my other fields," right?
Yeah.
Because maybe the boys there won't like you. You won't get along with them.
Yeah.
But here he said, "Stay here because I've commanded these people
Not to touch
you."
Yeah.
Well, he could have done the same to them in another field that worked for him. What is he worried about?
Well, the other thing is that it's not just. The other thing was that there are managers, and here they have a good eye to her as opposed to elsewhere. So
Why
even
do you have to say that I commanded not
even
to
when the boss tells one of the managers, "Look, do good for this one," it's still there's a certain discretion that every manager has. So Boaz felt she was in the fact that this manager had a good eye to her. She's better off working for this guy. Okay, pasuk yud. Vatipal alpana, she falls on her face. Vatishtachu ortza, she bows down to the land, to the ground. Vatomer love, she says to him, "Madua matzasichein beinecha lahakireni." Why have I found favor in your eyes that you show me special recognition? Va'anochi nachriya, I'm a foreigner, I'm a stranger. Says the Malbim. Ratzaloymar shema she'ata makarevosi. The reason you are bringing me close, kol kach. Why are you showing me special favor? Either I found favor in your eyes, that you see in me a good thing, or because you know my family, and you're doing it for them. In other words, we're just saying, why do you like me so much? Is it because I found favor in your eyes, or because you know my family? It's one of the two. So she asked about the first issue, Madua matzasichein, ma hatoy v'ashara yisabi. What's the good that you see in me? And about the second thing, Bi'alasheni Amra, Halo yanoichi nachriya. I am a foreigner. I am a stranger. So Vayan Boaz vayomer la. Boaz speaks up and he says to her, "Hu gade, hu gadli." It was told to me, Kol asher asis es chamaisech. Everything you did to your mother-in-law, acharei mois isheich, after your husband's death. Vatazvi avich v'imech, you forsook your father and mother, v'eretz meiladetech, and the land of your birth. Vatelchi, and you went, elama shalo yadat, to Shoshaim, to a nation that you did not know from yesterday. In other words, I don't know your family. I've heard about your good actions and your ma'asim tovim, and that's what finds favor in my eyes. It says Malbim, pasuk Yidal, Vayan Boaz vayomer la, ma shematzasachin be'enai. That which you find favor in my eyes, hum ibnei shnei dvarim, is for two reasons. Number one, ki hugad li kol asher asis es chamoisech. They told me everything you did to your mother-in-law. Shezem moyer al tiv midasech. This demonstrates your good Midos v'tiv libech, and your good heart shall arrive. Most times, hakala soina says chamosa. Most daughter-in-laws can't stand their mother-in-law. Befrat achrei moisi sheikh. And it's one thing they tolerate it when their husband's on. When their husband is dead, certainly not. And you, when your husband died, you took such care of your mother-in-law. You assisted her, you helped her. And the second thing that finds favor in my eyes, hu hageros, the conversion, Shailu Shem Shamayim, which was for the sake of heaven, Shaloi Bavar Eza Pnia, Me'eza Telas, it was for no ulterior motive. Chitzoini Shetasa Yadekach. Shaloi Ozve Azaft Avich V'imech V'atoch Elama Shaloi Yadat V'imkein Hoya Hageros Shem Shamayim. You left your father and mother and you came to a land where you stood nothing to gain. This is one of the central psukim of Megillas Ros. Shalim Hashem Pa'alech.
What does the Malbim say anything about? It could have just said Asher Lo Yadat, Elam Asher Lo Yadat, Tmol Shilshon.
Okay.
What was he adding there with Tmol Shilshon?
You didn't know at all, ever.
Lo Yadat.
Not before you were married, maybe. Not after you were married. Yishalim Hashem Pa'alech. Hashem should pay you for your work. And your reward should be complete from Hashem, the God of Israel, Asher Bas, that you've come lachzos tachas kanafach, to seek refuge under His wings. Two ideas are expressed. You should be given for your pu'ula, and you should be given for your schiros. We know in Hebrew there are two ways of saying a worker, a payel and a seicher, or a sacher. There are two ways of payment, yishalem and maskortech. What are these two things over here? Well, the answer is any worker. There are two ways of two types of workers. You could have a payal or a sacher. What's the difference? The payal gets paid for the job. Sacher gets paid by the hour. So in other words, you bring something to the tailor, he tells you $7. I don't care how long it took him or how short it took him. You're paying your $7. Whether it's a particularly hard hem or easy hem, it doesn't matter how well he was feeling, he gets paid for the job. Or you could get paid for the hour, for your work. When it comes to mitzvos, are we a payal or a seicher? Well, whenever we do a mitzvah, we get paid for that mitzvah. So every mitzvah is a pu'ula or a payal. However, she has no obligation to put herself in a situation where she's being given pu'ulais. But she was makabel on herself to become a geyores, which means that she became a soicher to Hashem. In that, she put herself in a situation where now the Rebbeinu Shalom could give her jobs. So that act of acceptance upon herself was akin to schiros. So really, when someone becomes a geyores, they're a payal of Hashem. Every time they do a mitzvah, they're doing a pu'ula. But they're also putting themselves as a permanent worker for Hashem. Now, they're putting themselves in a matzav where Rebbeinu Shalom could give them this pu'ula, that pu'ula, this job. In other words, they're becoming permanently employed by Hashem. Now, it's true, there might be only 5 jobs a day, but now they're sort of giving themselves over for whatever it is Rebbeinu Shalom will command them, even if they may not know what it is. So listen to how the Malbim reads the pasuk. Look at very beautiful pasuk Yud Beis. This is on page Yud Tes. Did I give you page Yud Tes? No. Oh. So we should start over?
We're up to 10.
But you know it by heart. Okay, so here. Okay. So pasuk Yud Tes is like the 8th line. Okay. Pasuk Yud Beis. Yishalem. Neged masha asis im chamoisech yishalem Hashem pa'alech. For what you did to your mother-in-law, let Hashem pay you back for your pu'ula. V'neged masha hesgayart tehi maskortech shalema me'im Hashem. Mitzad shehu elekei Yisrael. Elekei Yisrael refers to umashgiach aleim. He is the controller. V'al hagerim hanilvam aleim. and Hashem has divine providence to the Jewish people and all converts. Uve Medrash Amar, the Medrash says like this. Rav Chasa, says Rav Chasa, Asher bas lachsois tachas k'nafav, v'hu al pi masha kosafti beferish Torah HaKoyanim. Says the Malbim, this could be explained according to my commentary in the Torah HaKoyanim. Sheyesh hevdo bein sachir, or bein schar, uvein pu'ula, uvein sachir, uvein payal. Shahapayal ay uman yikabel schar ba'adam lach asher asa. A payal or an uman gets paid for the job. Lamashal achayir asa begin mekabel schar malachta. A tailor makes a garment and he gets paid. V'zenikra pu'ula shalakech schar pu'ulasai. In other words, he's getting paid for the job. Aval hasachir muskul zman kotzav. A sachir is rented out. Lamashal shalosh shanim. Bein yasa ezel l'malacha bein loyas. In other words, if you get a live-in, they get paid for the time, even if they're not working. Let's say you go away on vacation, you got to pay them. You're renting them out. You're paying them for a certain amount of time, regardless of whether they work or they don't work. So a payal is getting paid for the job, and a sachir is getting paid for the time. V'hinei al kol mitzvah u'mitzvah yikabel schar b'fnei atzmai b'payal. For every mitzvah you get schar b'payal v'yalzeh omar yishalom Hashem pa'alech. Ula mamasha b'lez gayer. But for that which you came to convert, sh'az kibla aleh lavid avodas Hashem l'kayim kol mitzvaysav. That which you accepted upon yourself to serve Hashem, to fulfill His mitzvahs, v'hi kum askarasoi kol yimei chayeh lavid avodasoi. It is like she's rented out to him, to Hashem, all her life to do His avodah. Me'oz magila schar sachir sheisham lo sachir tmidi. Then it's coming to her the reward of a sachir, that he should be paid constant schar, bein tasa, bein loy tasa, whether she does mitzvahs or not. So even if, in other words, let's say someone converts and has no opportunities to do mitzvahs, they're still rewarded because they sort of rented themselves out to Hashem in case He would command them. So she's going to get paid for every pu'ula by itself, but she's also getting paid in the fact that she sort of gave herself over to Hashem. Eternal reward, or constant reward. Why? Because you came to take refuge. She rented herself out to Hashem for her whole life. For this moment, you get constant reward. Besides that, every time you fulfill a mitzvah, in other words, besides the general reward, you get specific reward. So one more time. If you hire someone for a specific task, they get paid for the task. If you buy someone for a certain amount of time, you pay them regardless if they have to do anything, only because they rented themselves out. So Rus, because she became a Giyara, she's going to be paid independently for each mitzvah, but she's going to receive a general reward in the fact that she rented herself out to Hashem. So look at
different from a regular yid. Why is a ger apparently on a higher madrega gets more schar, because they get a double schar. They get schar schiras, plus they get every time they do a mitzvah, they get schar of a power. So why is it the ger better off than a regular yid? Is only a power gets pilas for each mitzvah and the time in between.
It sounds like a Jew is born into it. So a Jew has he's not selling himself to Hashem. Hashem already owns him. Elamai, when Hashem gives him a specific task, so you do it, you get reward. But are you giving yourself over to Hashem in general? Well, maybe that would depend on.
You don't have to do it.
Maybe it would depend on the person's specific attitude. In other words, if a person is really moser himself over to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that he says, Hashem, I'm yours, whatever you bring to my attention, I'm willing to do, then Ein Acharami, even if a person's not actively doing a mitzvah, he'll get paid for any mitzvah that comes up, but he'll get the general reward maybe that would depend on a person making that decision and saying, Rebbeinu Shalom, I'm ready, whatever you ask of me. Okay, I want to bring another idea to your attention. And that is, why does Hashem have to reward us? Let's say I learn. If I sit down and learn, and I'm doing it for the right reason, doesn't my neshama get such happiness from the mitzvah that sweetness and that enjoyment from the mitzvah, that should be enough. Let's say somebody goes to be mevakar chayla. Sometimes you have a good feeling. Your neshama feels elevated. Why isn't that not enough?
Yeah, the guf needs something. Maybe the guf needs a reward.
Why is the genuine feeling of satisfaction, isn't that enough of a reward? Well, says the Malbim, true, but that is a benefit. So why is that benefit not enough of a reward? Why does Hashem have to reward a person in Olam Haba? He gave us a reward already. Says the Malbim, truth be told, if your neshama is sensitive, you don't need any promises of Olam Haba. If you're really sensitive to the enjoyment of a mitzvah, that should be enough of a motivation to do the mitzvah. In other words, a person on the high enough level, he should be motivated. You know why I want to do the mitzvah? It's just so enjoyable to do the mitzvah. But you know and I know that we're not always on that madrega. Because sometimes we're too connected to this world to be motivated by that feeling of satisfaction when we do a mitzvah, because we're not always in tune to it. Sometimes we do the mitzvah against our will. We need something to bribe the guf, as you say, right? So the purpose of reward is not really for the person on the highest level. The person on the highest level, schar mitzvah. The reward for the mitzvah is the ability to do the mitzvah itself. The concept of reward in Olam Haba is only sort of to draw the animalistic urge. So look how the Malbim reads this. In the middle of the piece, the pasuk Yud Beis. V'hinei kvar chakarti bedrush artzas hashalom. The Malbim, besides writing a sefer on Chumash called and Tanakh, the Malbim, he wrote a sefer of drush called Artzos Hashalom. He also wrote a sefer on halacha called Artzos Hachayim. Artzos Hachayim, the Mishnah Berurah quotes quite often in Chelak Aleph. Artzos Hashalom, we quoted. I remember one time that we quoted the Artzos Hashalom, Parshas Bahaloischa. Sha'achar shezeh ba'atzma sheyiska adam asus mitzvus Hashem v'lavet avodas hamelech hagol yisbarach hu haschar hayoser gadol. If the greatest reward in the world is the ability to do the mitzvahs of Hashem, either in mitzad hashleimas hanafshi shiknai asiyas hamitzvos, whether it's the spiritual acquisition that you gain from doing the mitzvahs, in mitzad shebezehu even melech gadol boyrei kol, or the enjoyment of serving the King of the universe. Why is God promising us reward? Isn't the mitzvah itself the greatest reward? That's like saying, I'll reward you if you eat steak for supper. It's okay, Michael, I'll just eat the steak, you don't have to reward me. So why does Hashem reward us? Learn Torah, I'll reward you. I don't need reward, I just learn, that's great. Why does Hashem have to reward us?
Rabbi, his emotional is Hashem is like our father. When a father, his worker interacts with his children, he loves to reward them. Hashem gets satisfaction from giving us this schar, just like a father gets satisfaction. He wants to do it. So it's not just because maybe we don't need it. He wants to see a smile on our face.
Okay, very good. The Nefesh HaChaim says that in Pirkei Avos. It says, don't serve Hashem like an eved, right? Al tiyu mishamsha es harav. Al tiyu ka'avodim mishamsha sarav. Almanas l'kabel pras. Don't serve Hashem to receive reward. In other words, do the mitzvahs inherently. But it says in Nefesh HaChaim, the highest madrega is like this. Since we know Hashem is such a Baal Chesed, I'm doing the mitzvah to get reward because I want to make Hashem happy to get. Not that I want the reward. I don't need the reward. Hashem needs to reward us, so I'm doing it to make Hashem happy. That's the highest madrega. Halavai, right? So it says the Malbim like this. Truth is, if you have a sensitive heart and your soul is in tune to Noyam HaMitzvah, to the pleasantness of a mitzvah, and its sweetness, really, we don't need any promises other than the mitzvah itself. But since most people don't detect the pleasantness of a mitzvah and the great wealth that we acquire through it, Hashem has to reward us and promise us olam haba shezeh murgash etzlam kadei sheyasu mitzvah bavur tikvas haschar. This is something which is more our language. You can tell someone, "Hey, pal, stop involving yourselves in the pleasures of this world and go do a mitzvah. It's more pleasurable." He says, "Really? Really now?" He's not going to know what you're talking about. But I understand it. I feel it. This guy is not there yet. So you have to tell this guy, go do it. Hashem will give you even greater pleasures in Olam Haba. That's something more that speaks the language of the Nefesh HaBahamis. Ad Yagiu, ultimately you reach the level where you say, you know what? Forget Olam Haba. Doing mitzvahs is just so sweet. Lahargishu lahavin lasis ha-mitzvah lishma mitzvah mitzvah ba'atzma. So listen to this. Listen to how the Malbim reads the pasuk. This is what it means. Yishalim Hashem palei chaynu. Hashem yitain lecha schar pulasech. Hashem should give you your reward. Aval ha'emes hi. The truth is utahi maskur techshem Hashem. In other words, first he says, let Hashem reward you for the mitzvahs. But the truth is, you know what the ultimate reward is? You know what the maskur tech shlema? The ultimate reward is asher bas lachsois. The ultimate reward is that you came to do the mitzvahs. That's the ultimate reward. The ultimate reward is this itself, that you came to take refuge under his wings, that this itself is the complete reward, without any diminution at all. That's the true reward, Rus, for your mitzvahs. Ultimately, is that you could do the mitzvahs. Okay, let's just steal two more psukim. Okay, pasuk Yud Gimel. Vatomer. So Rus says, Taka emtzachin be'enecha. Let me find favor in your eyes, Adoni, my master. Kini chamtani, you've consoled me. B'chidi barta alev shivchasecha, you've spoken to the heart of your maidservant. But anoichi loy eya, and I really should not be ka'achas shivchasecha, like one of your maidservants. What's she talking about? What's she saying? What is she saying? I really shouldn't be like one of your maidservants. Rus is basically saying, I'm honored that you consider me like your shivcha. A shivcha kananis is chayiv in mitzvahs. I'm honored that you view me that way, that I'm somebody who is has the ability to do mitzvahs. It says the Malbim pasuk Yigim, after he told her why she finds favor in his eyes, Amar, she says, Amra, she says, Ken hiratzon shem tzachein lahaba. So may I find favor in the future. Kini chamtani, you've consoled me. Ratzleimer, bedibur harishayin. The first thing that you told me, shahidi Allah shu mikare v'asav v'shatim tzaparnasas aydei leket, that you're going to give me a good parnasa. That is a consolation for me. That was one of my worries when my husband died. How am I going to support myself? So that's the consolation. That's kini chamtani. And the second thing is, so that's what she says, kini chamtani. And then she says, "V'chi dibarta alev shivchasecha, uvedibur hasheni dibarta alev shivchasecha." Right, you've spoken to the heart of your maidservant. Roya ani, I see shenech shavas beinecha, that I'm considered in your eyes ka'achas shivchasecha, like one of your maidservants. Shekiblu gam kein das Yisrael, who've accepted the the religion kedin hashvachos, like a shivcha kananish beis Yisrael. In the house of a Jewish person, v'dibarta aliban, and you spoke to their hearts, the same way you speak to your shivchos in your house who've converted, and you tell them, you know what, you do the mitzvahs, Hashem will reward you, you've spoken to me. I'm very honored by that. I'm honored that you're promising me reward the way you talk to your shvachos who've been makabel the mitzvahs. Ki anochi be'enai, because I in my own eyes lo eya ka'acha shivchasecha. I'm not worthy of that distinction to be considered like one of your maidservants. V'ani be'enai pchusa. I have in mind v'Yehuda mehen, but I think that's a mistake.
It says by me also.
You have v'Yehuda?
Yeah.
What do you have? V'ani be'enai pchusa v'Yehuda?
Maybe it's a little different.
Yeruda, right. It's probably v'Yeruda. Probably lower than them. Ba'ata helisani lamala. You see how few people must have ever read this, right? if it still says Yehuda in the new print, lamala hazois lias ka'achas shivchaisecha. Okay, now listen to this. Vayomer la Boaz. Boaz said to her, La'is ha'oichel, by the mealtime, Goishi haloim. Now Chazal always tell us, Ein haloim ella Malchus, right? That haloim is a reference to Malchus. Like when Moshe Rabbeinu went by the sneh, right? Don't come, I'll tikrav haloim. Don't approach Malchus. So Malamit Moshe Rabbeinu bikesh Malchus. But the Malbim, we'll see how he interprets it. V'yachalt min halechem, eat from the bread. V'tavalt pitech b'chometz, dip your bread in vinegar. V'ateshev mitzad hakoitzrim, she sat beside the harvesters. Vayitzbat lakali, they sprinkled to her some parched nuts. V'atoichal, she ate. V'atizba, she was satisfied. V'atoisar, she had left over. Why in the beginning is it called lechem, and then it's called pitech? Says the Malbim. We'll try to end. This will be the last one. Meanwhile, the mealtime comes. Boaz is going to eat with the harvesters. You know why? Because does a harvester make brachas hamazon? Only the first two brachas. Unless the Gemara says in brachas on Daf Tezayin that otherwise it's stealing from the boss. But if the boss sits down with you, that means he's allowing you to make brachas hamazon. Now Boaz, being Yerei Shamayim, would go out of his way to sit with the workers to be mechayiv them in brachas hamazon. That's why it says Boaz is by the oichel and he's sitting together with his workers. Ki hapoilim she'osim b'schara, a worker who gets paid, ein mevarchim brachas hamazon, is not on a bench, rak shtei brachas. Avol kishabalabais, when the balabais is sitting with them, mevarchin kisiknam, has to make the bracha like it was in Niskan Kamasha Kasav Brachos, like it says in Brachos. He was certainly sitting with them to obligate them in benching. Ubayaz Yasha Baroish. Boaz was sitting at the head of the table. So just imagine, if Boaz is sitting with the workers, then he was sitting at the head of the table, and the workers must have been sitting along the sides. And he tells to Rus, Goishi haloim, come sit next to me. Right? Umilas haloim. Haloim always means makom nale, place of prominence. Mimadre gasai. And that's why Chazal say in haloim ela malchas. Haloim, Goishi haloim. Come sit in a place which is higher than your madrega. Yeah. V'yachalt is halechem. Now, is it lechem or is it pas? I always thought they're synonymous. No, lechem is the loaf, pas is the slice. What? Pas shachris. I thought it was synonymous. It says the Malbim in Tanakh, halechem hu hasholem, v'hapas hu hachituch leptitin. The pas is cut into slices. He says this comes from Taras Kohanim. Nosan lo lechem sholem shishla. He gave her a whole loaf. So he says v'achalt min alechem, and then shelachein lakcha hamoisel beisa. In other words, he gave her a whole loaf. Take the leftovers home. And then he says to her, eat from the bread. Min kol alechem. Eat from all the bread, and the slices that you slice off, dip in vinegar. V'apasha tachtach menu laechloi b'sudazu hatavo b'chometz. Dip it in vinegar. Vateshev. She didn't take him up on the offer. He said, come sit here. Vateshev mitzad hakoitzrim. She sits next to the harvesters. Okay, Vateshev ulam hilo yashva etzel boyaz rak lamat mitzad hakoitzrim. and he kept on passing her. He gave her nuts to enjoy. He gave her extra until the point that she was satiated and she had left over. Okay, Rabbi Sai, have a great day.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.